when you're going into a house, you're not going to shoot the master bedroom or the bedroom or whatever first. I'm using this image because a bedroom, I can get away with just doing a flash layer and an ambient layer. And I want to show you how I blend those two things together before I get into something where I'm blending, multiple frames together, or using multiple ambient frames or multiple flash frames or whatever. So we're just going to go into this part first. So whatever, these are all imported. I'm going to be using some of my own presets and stuff like that, which are available on my website if you guys want them. But I kind of touch on what they do, so you can do this without presets. I'm also gonna, just a heads up, I use actions in Photoshop 100% of the time when I do my Photoshop editing, but I'm going to show you I'm going to show you manually how to do it first, and I'll start getting into actions later. But I want you to see what the actions do before I start using them. So anyhow, so as I import, I have an import setting that everything gets applied to. And it's basically just brings your highlights down to 25, negative 25. It applies sharpening, a little bit of noise reduction. And this is, something that you're gonna have to do to raw images anyways. You're supposed to pre-sharpen raw images because they're actually soft. There's no sharpening, they're just raw. If you shoot a JPEG, it's going to have sharpening applied. It's going to have contrast applied and a saturation setting applied in camera. But when we capture them raw, there's nothing. So I add a pre-sharpen here. And then I also have a lens profile here. I don't know what, let's I'm not sure what, you guys can probably see it up here, but let me see. Okay, cool. So I shot this with a 24mm tilt shift lens. That's why there's no lens profile for it. It just comes out. I think that lens is profiled in camera or something. So we're not gonna worry about that. So I'm gonna minimize here. Okay, so first thing I do though is I have an ambient layer preset. So I hit that. It drops the highlights even more, bumps the shadows up, does something to the blacks here, reduces saturation. Basically what we're trying to do with this ambient frame is kind of make it as dull as possible, with not the sharpening, but tone and luminance. I'm going to kind of bring the bulk of my tones up to this area. This is about what I'm going to want this photo to look like, ceiling wise and luminance wise, in the end of everything. So I try to bring it to that little area. And this right here is kind of my sweet spot. I think it's like right between the midtones and the highlights. And then here's your brights, highlights, midtones, and the bulk of my stuff, I like it to be right around in that area. So overall here, so next thing we're gonna do is come over to the flash layer, and I have a flash layer preset to do that one. Kind of adding it right into the same spot luminance wise. I'm gonna take my eyedropper, and I know these sheets are white, so I'm gonna white balance off of that, fix that. The flash layer preset brings down highlights, it brings the shadows up, same thing, but it kind of leaves the color alone. And same sharpening is applied and same lens profile thing is applied. Not really much else is going on here between the flash and the ambient layer. Now you can see the difference. Flash layer, the highlights are controlled. I don't have like a super clear blue sky out here, but if I think this will do. If you did want to bring it down more, you can always go to your luminance, your HSL panel, and grab the blues and kind of drag them down more, and you can get like a more rich blue sky if you were looking for that. But I'm just going to leave it alone. So I'm going to take both of these photos. So I got my ambient and my flash, and I'm going to I have a control built, but I'm going to edit these in Photoshop, open as layers in Photoshop. So as it imports, since I shoot my ambient frame first, it always loads on the top, which I don't want to do. I always reverse that. So I'm going to take my ambient layer and drag it underneath here. Actually, let me just put this like this so I don't get eager to use that. So I'm gonna just rename these real quick. So we're gonna call this flash base, and we're gonna call this one ambient base. Oh, didn't spell that right. There we go. Okay. So now I have my flash layer on top, and I have my ambient layer underneath, right? First thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to show you a super easy way to blend this together. I also practice non-destructive editing until the image is how I want it, and then I flatten it all out and save it. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a mask, right? And I'm going to fill that mask with, let's see, what's fill. I'm going to go to 50% gray. A 50% gray mask is going to make this layer 50% opacity, but I can control the opacity from the mask. So if I brush in white, it's going to reveal more of the flash layer. If I brush in black, it's going to reveal more of the ambient layer. So white brushes in the layer, black brushes out the layer, okay? So that's step number one. Now, you might look at this and you might think that it's fine. Nice even mix, but I see a couple of things that we're gonna wanna change. Like the flash shadows from this this little area right here. Oh, quick. I'm gonna go back here too. I'm gonna show you how I light these also. So this room, it's an even kind of blanket of light. I basically have the camera positioned at the door, looking into the room, and then I'm reaching in over the camera with my flash pointed backwards, kind of up towards the door jamb in the ceiling, and I'm flashing it onto that, and then it's flashing into the room. So I'm going to show you a quick example over here of what that could look like. It looks kind of like this right here. So this is me in the kitchen, but this is, I mean, if you could imagine the ceiling of that bedroom right here and the wall, basically the door jamb, I'm reaching my hand in and flashing it like that. The camera would be positioned right here, looking this direction right in front of me. I'm standing right behind it, and like that. So that's what it would look like in that flash layer. That's how I flash. And that's how I bounce light. That's how I light everything, okay? If I'm trying to light what's in front of me, I'm pointing the flash behind me. If I'm trying to light to the right, I'm pointing it to the left, and I'm gonna let that bounce back and bounce back in here. Now, let me see, I'm gonna reset this. To create soft light, which is also what we're trying to do here, you try to back this away from the wall as much as you can, so you can create a bigger spread of light, because a bigger light source, the bigger the light source, the softer the light. In this image here, you can kind of see that. Now, it's not super soft, but you can kind of see here, I'm lighting this giant area over here and having a flash back into the kitchen, and I'm getting a nice light kind of raking into the kitchen. So you can see where I'm looking at what I'm trying to light. I'm actually, my flash is pointing backwards and up towards the ceiling / door jamb or wall or whatever, that joint. But that's how I light, okay? Phil, does that all make sense?
Yeah, I was going to mention that if you're not a giant like Gary and you can't reach over the camera, you can get
Yeah,
just put your flash on a stick and you can do
yeah,
that, and you
yeah,
can get in a
yeah,
little bit further. But
yeah.
Gary's like 6'7", tall,
Yeah.
so
Full
he can do all.
disclosure, I'm giant. I'm 6'5". with shoes on, probably closer to 6, 7. But but anyhow, so but that's kind of how I approach my lighting, and that's how it's very simple. It's just bounce lighting, but that's how you do it. You try to make as big of a spread as you can. That way the light is as soft as you can get. And you can kind of see that here. It's a pretty soft light. So anyways, back to editing here. So I already made a 50% mask on my flash layer, and it's, you know, it's blending into the layer beneath it halfway. Now, what I want to do though is I want to kind of bring in more of the sky and more of the, you know, the exposure outside from the flash layer, but I don't want to mess with anything in here. I just want to mess with the windows and kind of some of these highlights, and maybe even like this highlight right here on the bed. You know, it's a little hot. So I'm going to try to control a couple of those things with a flash layer. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it down here, reproduce it. I'm going to get rid of this mask. So now basically we have here, I'm going to call this windows and highlights. So we're just going to worry about that for this. I'm going to take this frame and I'm going to put it in darken mode. Okay. So we're going to have it darken whatever is underneath it. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is add, I'm going to hit option and then click add a mask so that it'll add a black mask. So now we're not seeing the layer that this mask is attached to. We're not seeing the windows and highlights. We're just seeing everything underneath it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a white brush at 100% flow and 100% opacity. And about this size should work, maybe a little bit smaller. And I'm just going to take it and I'm going to brush in right along that edge of that window frame and just kind of bring in that exposure. So now it's only darkening. It's only going to darken what's outside that window. I don't like what it's doing to the stairs. So I'm going to just, I click back to black, and now I'm painting out that part of the stairs. But now I hit X and it brings me back to white. And I'm going to brush in this little area on this window and this little area on this window just to kind of bring that exposure down. Now you can kind of see what this does. You see how it just darkens those areas. Doesn't really affect what's going on inside so much. You can kind of see it right here in the windowsill as I flick it on and off here. See that? Now, if you want to get it, you know, be a stickler, you can go through and, you know, take that stuff out. Like just go against that windowsill and take off like whatever you don't want that layer doing.
I think for running the mill real estate, no one's ever going to notice that.
You're not gonna notice a lot of that. If the blooming or if the haloing is really bad, your exposures aren't as even as they should be. And you can always correct that, but you want to try to get them in the same ballpark, because that will help you avoid having to go through and do those little micro adjustments, because we are trying to, I mean, speed is, you know, of the essence here, and I know that. You'll see, like, once I start applying my actions, how fast this actually can be, but I'm just breaking it down so that's, you know, you're understanding what I'm doing. And even this is all going to be recorded, so you'll be able to kind of go back and check this all out at another time, but just stay with me here. So another thing is I'm going to just try to brush in some of this highlight control here on the bed, and it's not doing a whole lot. That sun is really strong there, but as you can see, that little darken layer does a little bit of work on the windows. When you're working with like a real window pull as a view, this little move is a great thing. Another thing that we can do is, I mean, I can show you how to do a little bit of color correction, but I'm not seeing any color, you know, problems in this photo really. So I'm gonna just skip that part. But now we gotta hide the flash stuff, right? So like these little shadows here, I can kind of see this flash under the bed coming from, or the shadow, which I don't want that. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take the ambient layer and I'm gonna duplicate that and bring it up to the top. Now, this layer, I'm going to call it luminance. So we're going to take the luminance from this photo. What you want to do is you come down here and you change this to luminosity layer. Now what this is going to do is only apply luminance, no color. It's not applying color. You're only showing like basically light and dark. You could make this layer black and white and it would make no difference because it's not taking any color from it, or it's not supposed to take any color from it. But what I'm going to do is I don't, like before, I don't want to affect any of the work that we did underneath here. So I'm going to add a black mask, option, add a mask. I don't know what that is on the PC, but you guys can probably figure that out. You're smarter than I am. And okay, so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to get a big fat brush, soft. I do this part right here, you guys. I hold down Control and Option, and then click the mouse down, and then drag it up or down, and you can control your hardness, softness, and size, just in case you're wondering. So what I'm going to do is brush in the luminosity layer. I'm going to go under the bed, kind of follow that. Anywhere you see a flash shadow happening that you don't want, you brush this layer in. You don't have to go 100% on this if you don't want to. You could go 20% and kind of do it slower, but I'm just trying to show you what it does real fast here. And we're just going over the parts that you can see where there's an obvious flash layer. So you can hide this. You can hide some of that, kind of get that more ambient feel. I'm going to brush out this part just because I want that to be brighter. But and then another thing we want to use this layer for is we want to, if you can kind of see the ceiling on the ambient layer, I like how that kind of the light's trickling in. So I'm going to just go ahead and brush in that ceiling. And this is another way you can hide your flash shadows from like a ceiling fan or something like that. You brush in that luminance right on top of it. And there we go. So now you can kind of see what this luminance layer does. It hides all the flashiness, right? And kind of brings in a little bit more of that natural look without, damaging what this blend is doing down here.
The ceiling, I think, is what gives the image the most dimension and makes it most natural. Because if you don't have that, it makes the image look so much more flat. If you don't have the ambient ceiling,
yeah. We don't want to go for bland. We want it to look natural, but we want it to look controlled, and we want it to look balanced. Balance and control that's why we're doing the Flambient technique in the first place. If we didn't care about that, you could just do HDR.
And then one thing that could happen is if you don't have the ambient and the flash layers at a close exposure value, you'll get the colored shadows when you blend them in. And one thing you guys can do to mitigate that is you can throw on a new layer and switch it to color, to the layer style, and switch to color. And you can take a color sample from around that area and you can paint that in, and it'll color in that shadow to what it should be.
That's one thing you can do. I'll show them that in a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. There's not a ton of color issues in this photo, so
yeah.
I didn't really touch on it yet, but we'll jump into something like that in a minute. But overall, I would say I also brushed in this little wall right here. I want some of that ambience coming in, so you can kind of see how much this layer is probably one of the more important layers, I would say, of creating this final image. It makes for a very nice look, but I would call this done as far as Photoshop. So I'm going to flatten the image, and then I'm just going to do Command S, save it right back into Lightroom here. It's going to pop up, and then this is where you add all your color and your contrast and whatever else all back into it. So let me click this up. And then I use blended image. Just hit my little preset there. And you'll see what it does down here. It bumps your exposure up, it bumps your contrast up, brings your highlights down again a little bit. Bumps your shadows up, bumps your whites up, brings the blacks down to kind of add in some more contrast, affects your clarity, adds a little dehaze, vibrance, saturation. It also adds another round of sharpening after this. So now this is your image sharpening, not your pre-sharpen. This is just your normal sharpen. And then it also hits to remove your chromatic aberration one more time, because why not? We don't like chromatic aberrations, so let's get rid of that as much as we can. And as you can see here, once it loads, you have a super sharp image. Everything is, nice. There's no flash anywhere that you can really see. I would call this a done deal. And what I normally do when I'm finished is I add my finals to my quick collection. So you just hit B and it adds it to your quick collection. And that's kind of how I figure out whether it's a final or what. So there's that. Does that all make sense? How's any questions, Phil, or is that
Yeah, I think
all?
everyone seems to be getting it.
Okay, cool.